Michael has been working with the Minisink compressor lawsuit and perhaps other lawsuits as well, and he's going to fill you in on that part of the legal fight, the legal issues. Michael, thank you.
Let me first thank Sustainable Warwick for the opportunity to address such a large crowd, and I'm delighted that everyone's here. Michael Edelstein is in the audience, and I couldn't help but thinking about the late 1980s and early 1990s, when Orange County spent $57 million, built a landfill on the principal aquifer in our county, next to the Wallkill River, next to prime agricultural land, on approximately 100 acres of wetlands without a 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. And Orange Environment stepped up to the plate, led by Michael, and we went to federal court. It had been built. It had been built. It never opened. And the county wasted $57 million. So for people who say that because they started here, it can't be stopped, you're wrong. There are legal concepts at play, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes trying to elaborate those so everyone has a foundation to understand exactly where we are and where we're trying to get. New York State has a law called SECRA, State Environmental Quality Review Act, which requires any project of this magnitude to have a lead agency, here the way we on the planning board, and for that lead agency to examine every aspect of a project. In this particular case, that work was done largely in 2009 and 2010, which in terms of our knowledge of fracking, our knowledge of the impacts of these sorts of plants could have been in 1990. Because since 2010, there have been more than 600 scientific articles which dissect the impact of the growing fracking, hydrofracking industry in the United States. And what they depict, frankly, is not pretty. I'm not going to have the time to go into it, but in summary, it's rather cataclysmic for human health. When this plant was studied, there was no study of the impact of fracking. There was no study, as is required by the state of New York, of the inducing effect of the demand from this plant on fracking operations. New York State does not limit that review to state boundaries. That review is a generic review. Wherever fracking is induced by this plant's demand, what will be the effects? And can they be mitigated? Now that question was never even asked in 2009, 2010 during this review. In early 2015, CPV went back to the town of Wawayanda, the planning board, with a new site plan. That is, amendments to the prior approved site plan were put before the board, triggering the requirement for a new review. Many of the people in this room, at least some of you, went to those public hearings. And what you saw at those public hearings were scores and scores of union members, some others allowed in, close enough to speak, and a planning board would shut down public discussion. A planning board which would not allow members of the public to address a number of newly revealed issues which the board needed to consider. Our argument is that the board needed to consider those issues whether CPV came back for a new site plan review or not. But given that CPV was there for a new site plan review, there was absolutely no excuse for not considering the plethora of new environmental information. The board refused. I'm talking about the way we on the planning board. And what the board did, perhaps cynically, perhaps not, is it gave all the public comments in writing to CPV's lawyers to address. And CPV's lawyers addressed many of those public comments by saying, the point is not relevant. We don't have to address it. So when people from the public said, for example, there's been a new declaration by Fish and Wildlife of an endangered species, the northern-eared bat, which habitats on this site and which was not studied in the context of it being an endangered species. Are we going to study it anew and the impacts? Not relevant. The governor of New York in December of 2014 banned fracking because of its injurious effects on human health and safety. How could it be consistent, members of the public asked, in that context, for the County of Orange to have approved a plan dependent on fracking, or for this board to have done that? Have you studied that question? This is not a relevant area of inquiry.